Hi, I'm Bekim, and this is Lending Thoughts, sponsored by Rocket Pro. Today, I'm joined by my friend, who is the CEO and founder of Deeded Law, Reuven Gorsht. Reuven's going to be talking to us about the client experience and has some great things to say about that, and then goes on to tell us a little bit more about how AI will play a factor in the future. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Have a listen. Reuven, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, it became great to be here. Super excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited to bring this conversation to the public. We've been friends for years now, ever since we started Rocket Mortgage Canada, and ever since you started Deeded, we've gotten to know each other really well. Often having conversations that span from anywhere from like politics and macro to specific mortgage adjacent conversations. So being able to have this conversation, ask you some good questions. Who knows what direction it'll go in, but appreciate you being here. I know a bit about you, but would love for you to tell the audience a bit about yourself. Can you tell us your life story in 60 seconds or less, please?
Absolutely. Well, I'll try to keep it to the 60 seconds. You got to cut me off when I go off and ramble. So, my name is Reuven, co founder and CEO of a company called Deeded. And Deeded basically streamlines the closing process for real estate mortgages. Prior to that, I had another startup in the real estate space that I built and exited. Before that, spent a good amount of time in the corporate world doing, all sorts of roles from marketing to product to operations. And that's where I feel I've cut my teeth. And now going backwards to childhood as well, always enjoyed, building things, tinkering, learning, being curious about things, which I think, brought me to this point today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you did a good job. Definitely under 60 seconds, so I appreciate that. But let me dive in a little bit there. Where did you grow up, Ruben?
I grew up mostly in the Toronto area to immigrant parents and,
Hmm.
didn't really have a sense of, what I wanted to do growing up. So for me, it was, that curiosity has always been fed by, taking apart toys to getting on the early days of, computers and the internet and all that stuff. So
Okay, so kind of a tinkerer. And then you had another business. You said that you built and ultimately exited. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that before we dive into the next topic, which would love to learn more about what you're doing at Dita today after that?
yeah, absolutely. So, back in 2015, as I mentioned, I was in corporate world for more than I'd like to admit. And the one thing that I've always felt is I've always been an entrepreneur, just happened to be inside of bigger companies, right? And I had the luxury of always being able to build within those companies, so sort of, fence off, an innovation team or build apps or even build businesses within businesses. But going back to 2015, there was a point in my career where I couldn't scratch that itch, and I tried everything that I could to try to fix it, not knowing what's wrong. And then I decided to eventually call it burn the boat. So submit my resignation, say, you know what, I've done well, I've climbed the ladder. I've got a lot of things that are potentially, looking very positive in the future. But what I want to do is I want to, give myself a little bit of a runway to figure out if I can make it on my own. And I've always said in my mind, I'll give it a year or two. And, with the support of my wife and my family, was able to do that, make that transition. And first year or first few months, it really, really hits you in the face. And I think, you come out with some huge expectations saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to follow the blueprint that happens with the one you read in like Fortune magazine or, Fast Company at the time. It's like, hey, started the company, went like that and raised $100 million and all that sort of stuff. Well, bad news, it really doesn't happen that way. So it just, the first couple months, you just, you get acclimated to this is going to be a journey, and the stakes are very, very different than when you are on the corporate side. So eventually, came up with an idea which I spent a lot of time vetting within the industry. The idea was basically that, moving homes is essentially one of the most stressful activities that you'll ever do. I think moving comes third after death and divorce.
Hmm.
And nothing really existed out there to help you control and manage all the variables, from booking a moving truck to changing your address to ordering a new driver's license or a health card and all that sort of stuff. So we ended up building a platform and a concierge that essentially helps you manage all that. So you're saying, I'm moving from point A to point B, and it'll say, here's everything you need to do. Here's everything you need to manage. Here's how to do it. And again, just through getting that iterative feedback, first year was a total grind. We didn't see us, going anywhere. And then it eventually started taking off. It took off to the point that, we had some pretty decent like mass adoption within the real estate community. And I think most folks that are in the real estate business know how fragmented that industry is. I mean, Canada alone's got about 160, 170,000 real estate agents. But it did, to our surprise, things caught on, started, getting calls, started getting more demand. And in 2018, the opportunity came up to essentially exit or sell the business. And we were a little bit of a fork in the road in terms of, do we go raise money and scale this up, or do we actually sell it? I think part of it was, the market was going down. 2018 had that, blip or uncertainty in the market. Ended up exiting that company, sold it to Royal Bank, spent about a year within the bank building it up and scaling it to the next level. So bringing on new team members and all that stuff. And then left the bank in 2019, about a year in. And I've always committed, you can see the books behind me. I've been buying these books for years, love to read, love to learn. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to spend the next 3 months, take the time off, recharge, read the books, all that sort of stuff. And I think I got to the third chapter of my first book. And then the anxiety starts kicking in. What am I doing next? There's no emails coming in and all that sort of stuff. And that's where the idea for my next company, Deeded, was born.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a fantastic entrepreneurial story. So true. Often what we think about in the beginning of an entrepreneurial journey is like, hey, like, I can build this in 90 days, or, here's like the first 6 months, but it's usually years, and it's always more than you thought. But I think the saying goes, like, if I had known how hard it would be, I never would have started. So we're
Yeah.
glad that you started. MoveSnap was a very cool product for anybody who's unfamiliar. Go and check it out. I think it's not live today, if I'm not mistaken. Reuven, is that correct? But
Yeah.
it once was, and it was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing then, leading right into Deeded, you're at home, you can't sit still with a book despite knowing that you probably should, and you start getting the itch again, and you start getting into the weeds of what you can do next. Was it as simple as saying like, hey, I've done this in the realm of, real estate, housing, mortgage, etc., and this is the next thing? Or was there like an insight of some sort or an experience of some sort that led you to think like, this is what I need to do next?
For me, it was a bit of both. I love the real estate industry because it's challenging and it's full of challenges, right? Like home ownership is such a big deal for so many Canadians. Yet I think we all know that the process could be better. The journey to get there is sometimes grueling and full of friction. So I've really fallen in love with the industry and how challenging it is, and how, challenging it is even to bring a product to market. So that's where I had, a lot of confidence from primarily making a lot of mistakes in my previous company. The other insight was when I was, buying a house and around that time, and I was moving in, and I get a call from my lawyer at the time that says, hey, missing a document and I'm not going to be able to close. And I said, well, whoa, what's going on here? I got the movers are coming in the afternoon. We even have people coming over on the weekend to, wish us well and have housewarming party. What do you mean you won't be able to close? Long story short, we ended up in the Holiday Inn for the weekend. We were homeless. We had to, essentially be extorted by the movers and pay some huge penalties for bridge loans and all that stuff. And again, that sort of gave me the next week's project, which is like to really understand what happens behind the scenes and how could it be that something like this happening wasn't properly anticipated. And what I'd learned and what sort of unfolded over the next few weeks as I started digging in more is that closing process, the legal and closing process, has not been innovated on. It's been the same old since like the 80s and arguably even earlier. And, primarily, lacking things like, effective communications. And, here we are as, 21st century consumers. And I think you and I are all on, platforms like Uber and Amazon and everything, where we're, spoon fed this information in real time, puts us in control. We know what's going on. Our GPS tells us, right down to the second when we're going to arrive somewhere. But here we are with a really, really ancient way of doing things, a little bit of a black hole where, your closing goes to a lawyer's office. You might hear back, you might not hear, you have to follow up. And that sparked a lot of passion about, like, hey, you know what, we can fix this. Like, we can streamline, this part, we can streamline other parts of the process that would make it more consumer friendly, and with an overall mission to not wanting anybody else to experience what I've experienced, right? And again, like, people anticipate home ownership. They get really, really excited that, hey, today's the day. And for them to get a phone call to say something went wrong and isn't happening, I think just, shatters a lot of dreams. So that's been our mission from day one. Kind of, decided to go ahead and start, putting together a team. And fast forward to March of 2020, literally, I think March 2nd, we started in a small office. That was our launch date. And 2 weeks later, COVID hits and everything gets shut
Mhm.
down. And, we kind of said, hey, well, thanks for coming out. Maybe I can go back and ask for my job back at the bank. But little did we know all this systemic change that was going to be driven in the industry from not only a massive, unprecedented boom in real estate and mortgages, but also our ability to scale the business much quicker than we anticipated. Because what happened during that first COVID lockdown is everything that was essentially in person before, meaning you had to go, see a lawyer or sign your documents. I think a lot of folks that are listening have probably gone through the process themselves, signing that stack of documents, all of a sudden could be done virtually. Meaning,
Mhm.
you can sit on at home on your couch or your favorite, vacation spot, sipping a margarita and sign for your home. And congratulations, you're now a homeowner. So that was a really, really big game changer for us at the time. And I guess a bit of the silver lining from everything else that was going on with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, we launched our business at the same time. We were March 1st of 2020. By March 12th, I remember that was the day I was sitting on my couch and they were shutting NBA games down at like halftime of the games. And like, uh-oh, well, we just launched a mortgage business. What's this going to look like now? And what's interesting is a lot of our original concepts and ideas for how we would innovate, which is like getting rid of paper signatures, doing things virtually, that just became table stakes to operate. And it was like some of it was, hey, like this is great because of the way that we plan on doing our business anyways, even though there's this terrible world event going on right now and no one can leave their homes, like we're here to serve. I think the challenge was that the people that we thought we were disrupting, who were doing it a different way previously, were now doing it the same way that we were doing it. And closing services were much the same. In fact, I'm drawing back on memory right now. I remember being like very, very gray as to whether or not lawyers could actually even sign documents virtually. And there were, temporary congressional sort of bills passed and things like that allowed for that to happen. Some of which have actually been rolled back
Yeah.
post COVID. And, some places have gone back to like, well, we want signatures again in ink. So why is that? Because I feel like we've come a long way. I feel like these things are working really well. I think that this is what consumers want. Why did we learn a new way of doing business? It worked for your business model, it worked for ours. Generally, from what we're hearing from consumers, is they much prefer this new way of being able to, research mortgages online, get the best rate, get the best options, shop the market, get a digital service that, is not very opaque, but rather transparent, that allows them to track their mortgage and see all their status updates. Because I agree, like, we've done thousands and thousands of mortgages. I've done thousands in my career. Nothing is worse than a client who's waiting to sign at the closing table or within, days of waiting to sign. And then they get hit with a last minute request and say, I've done everything that I have to do up until this point. How could this possibly happen now? It really shouldn't happen. And we fixed a lot of it, yet we went back. Why do you think some of that is?
It's because government works at a very different pace than us as, progressive companies and consumers. I do believe that, as a whole, COVID and some of the changes have probably leaped us forward by at least a decade. And that's not only on the regulatory side, that's even on the lending side as well, right? So there's a lot more openness to doing things virtually and things like that. And those, I believe, are here to stay. From a government perspective, for the most part, it has, turned into law to do virtual signing of documents. I think some provinces are just lacking behind. And a lot of it is just about having the right framework in place to ensure that, you're still safe and secure, you're still protecting the public and all that stuff. So from my vantage point, I'm still very optimistic. These are bumps in the road, but we will be back to more of a fully digital, say, mortgage experience from end to end, probably in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Thanks for saying months. I thought you were going to say years there.
I hope
I
not.
almost paused. No, same. So you talk about this emotional experience and how important it is for clients. There was a study done a few years ago. I think it was actually Zillow who conducted this study, and it's always stuck with me ever since. But over 50% of homeowners admit to having cried during the home buying process due to the stress. There's so much going on. We talked about moving to start, but there's the mortgage, there's the moving, there's the real estate agent, there's family dynamics. If you got like a kid who doesn't want to move from, living next to their friends, and parents who are telling you that, hey, back in my day, we bought a house for $31,000. We can't believe that you're spending all this money on this new home. And you're trying to explain that. And then, you have transition of services that are all taking place at that time. You've got to get new keys cut, like super duper stressful. And all these things take place in silos along the way. And then there's the insurer, and then there's the lender, and then there's the servicer. How do you think about integrating the entire transaction? Because what you're doing at Deeded is really taking a part of the value chain and a part of the client experience, and you're really focused on making that part fantastic, because it's not easy to start with the whole mortgage or real estate journey and make it all perfect out of the gate. But like, what is Deeded's part in that? Maybe even explain exactly how Deeded fits into that chain, and then how it fits into the larger chain, and how you think about the integrated real estate experience as a whole.
It's a loaded question, Bekim, but I'll start with where Deeded fits in. So we're what I would call the last mile, right? So the last mile is kind of the equivalent of like the post office. Maybe it's a bad example with, Canada Post being on strike right now, but the post office delivering your package. But there's a lot of stuff that happens upstream from us that requires collaboration, requires cohesion, requires an educational part to the consumer. And I think most importantly, and this is what we've really opened up the box on at Deeded, is transparency and accountability. So for example, one of the things that we do is every step of your closing, every single milestone is in your personal secure dashboard, and everything is time stamped. And when it's time stamped, it means that at least for our part of the process, we're taking full accountability to know that something is moving from date to date, from timestamp to timestamp, and things are going well. And when they're not, we have the systems and we have the process to intervene and make sure that things happen. At the same time, as you mentioned, there's a lot of fragmentation. And then I think that's kind of the challenge and the beauty of the real estate industry is that you've got literally, if you think even US, 1.3 million realtors, probably hundreds of thousands of loan officers. So arguably from a consumer buying a home, I have an infinite combination of experiences that I could have, right? I can have, a great real estate agent, but not such a great loan officer, or vice versa, or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere at the lender, things mess up, or maybe a piece of paper didn't make it back to the lawyer or the title company. Again, there's so many players that need to come together and need to be accountable for ultimately, as you said in the Zillow survey, the consumer not crying. That's what we're trying to bring. And in fact, we're trying to say, from our perspective, if you're going to cry, then better be happy tears because you're excited, right? So ultimately, there's a lot of work to do, but there's already very like-minded companies like your company, like others that are in the space that are seeing eye to eye and putting that experience first and foremost. That's what we do from our vantage point. Every single decision that we make is all about the customer experience, making sure that we're removing the friction, sometimes at a higher cost or causing more friction for us internally. But we try to remove that from the consumer ever seeing or being involved in that. And that's led to a lot of success.
Right.
And I know, you and I have chatted about how you guys are doing the same or very similar things at Rocket, where the consumer always feels like, hey, they've got a point of contact. They've got someone that can answer all their questions. And ultimately, from the minute that they start applying to the minute that they get their keys, it's all one seamless journey across the board, no matter who's accountable for it. And our challenge is to make it seem very holistic behind the scenes.
Have you ever seen The Bear, the show? It's like a Apple show.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the cook, how it's like entirely crazy in the kitchen area and everyone's going nuts. But by the time that waiter or waitress gets like the plate and they pop through the door to go serve, they're like smiling, calmly walking forward. And, meanwhile, it had just been a complete mess in the background. And oftentimes that's what a real estate transaction is when you combine all these archaic legacy technologies, all these different parties. There's so many lines of communication open. There's so many things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
I think people, knew the truth of like all the things that could go wrong as part of a transaction. It would actually scare them even more. That 50% number for tears might be much higher, and not happy tears. And what some of the best players I think in our industry do is they hide all that, they absorb all the pain on the back end, and then they make the consumer feel like everything's going really smoothly on the front end. So I can appreciate that, and I like the way that you think about that, which is like, hey, like let us sort of like handle all the complexity. What you need to focus on is like, here's the high level things that we're executing on. Here's the things that you need to do. We're going to bring that visibility forward for you, Mr. Mrs. Client. We're actually going to give you the ability to track that information inside of a portal. You should not be surprised because I've told you everything that I'm going to need from you. And as that list goes along and as you provide the various things that help us clear your conditions, we're going to give you some green check marks along the way. And when all those green check marks are present, we're ready to sign your document. That's a beautiful experience, something that I think we're all trying to create. I want to foray a bit into how you see AI playing into that. And the reason why is what you're really talking about is taking something that would otherwise be traditional communication and calling someone and saying, here's your most recent update. You're bringing that forward to the client's view through technology, really. And oftentimes, what technology does the best is take something that is maybe not as formulaic on the back end and a little bit convoluted and confusing and difficult, and put it in front of a consumer in a very slick, good consumer experience. And a lot of the things that we're researching and starting to implement on our own as well is the advancements of AI to improve our consumer experience as a whole. So how are you thinking about AI playing a factor in this in the future? And is it something that DDIT is working on today?
Absolutely. I'm super jazzed about AI. And at the same time, we're only scratching the surface from what we've seen so far. And we've already seen so many exciting ways so far to essentially take that experience and orchestrate it. AI, ultimately, the way we're thinking about it is a lot of the friction that happens is because you've got literally about 30 to 40 different individuals and organizations in that real estate cycle, right? So we're relying on people to essentially, hey, it's Wednesday today. I got to come in, I got to do my job, and I got to push a button on a document approval, or I've got to send this out, or I've got to make a phone call. And all these manual steps, I bet you if we were to go map it out, there's probably going to be thousands upon thousands of steps and then variation included in a mortgage, say a property purchase or a sale. AI finally has got a technology that could be somewhat, and I'm going to refer to something called agentic AI, which is kind of the next iteration where every job becomes almost like an AI agent, right? So you've got a document checking agent, you've got an underwriting agent, you've got a make sure I have everything I need at this point in time type of agent. And when all of that connects, it really does have the promise on delivering on a holistically better experience. And along the way, taking that education and answering any questions, putting that consumer at ease to a whole new level. Like even now you can, design your own avatar, and chatbots have got so good. I mean, I'm kind of the first to admit that, I go on a website, and if I get a chatbot, the first word that I type is human, and I'll type human until a human connects. And I've gone through some experiences recently where it's mind blowing of how, essentially an AI or a bot can help you get the job done without having the friction of, being on hold with someone for an hour or even 10 minutes, right? And
Yeah.
getting those tasks done. And at the end of the day, I think all of us, just want an outcome, right? I don't know how too many people except us that really care about how it happens behind the scenes. But, the reason I'm an Amazon consumer is because I know it'll happen. I know it'll show up at my door. I know Uber is going to
Yeah.
deliver my meal or pick me up from the airport. So I'm paying for that certainty. I don't really care about all the 10,000 steps that happen in the background. But,
Hmm.
now with AI, a lot of that is just going to be optimized to a whole new level.
Yeah, I like that framework that you put around, like, as a consumer, you don't really care about what goes into the sausage making. You just want to eat the sausage, right? Or when I order this car service and it tells me that my car is 6 minutes away, and it actually puts it on my screen of like how it's driving to me, I could see that it's real, it's happening. And everything that had to go into hiring the driver and compensation and getting them connected to their own version of the driver version of the Uber app, like that's not all my problem.
Right.
AI does a nice job solving for that. And I'm much the same. I've actually been having a ton of fun over the last while just testing all these different AI things. What's crazy, Reuven, for me is having tested many of these, be it your chatbots, AI voice calling, as an example, just the advancements that I've seen in the last 6 months are astonishing. I used to go and find every single trial I could of like an AI voice feature for calling, and the latency on these things would be like 5 to 10 seconds.
Mhm.
In some of these, it's almost instantaneous now. You could speak to it the same way that you would speak to another person. In fact, some of them have gotten so fast, they had to slow them down so that it actually sounds like a real person and isn't operating too quickly, because that's how fast they've been able to process information now. And on the chat side, I'm thinking about, there was a time when you used to try to hide from the fact that it was an AI or an automated, large language model that was like backing this thing up and giving the client the experience. Now it's like, hey, I'm your AI chatbot, and you can be on the other side of it saying, like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Why do I need some human to schedule an appointment next Tuesday at 10 a.m. when I could literally type in, can you please schedule me a phone call next Tuesday for 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time? And it says, okay, no problem. What's the best number to reach you? You put in the phone number, and it says your appointment is now confirmed. We'll send you an email or text message confirmation, and we'll have someone reach out to you at that time. Why wouldn't I do that instead of waiting for someone maybe to come into the office the next day and message me at 9 a.m. when it's not convenient for me because now I'm in the middle of my workday? When I think about what's coming in what used to be the parts of the technology that were hidden, that we would try to avoid and try to make them appear like they were humans, I think one of the big cultural changes will be we are just going to accept that it is an AI technology on the other side of the transaction. But if it helps us do what we need to do, we're going to be okay with that ultimately. And we're the old guys here. Our kids' generation and that, like, they won't want any friction in any experience in anything they do. And they want AI to solve for everything. And by the way, that's the next generation of future homeowners, right?
I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, it's funny when I, talk about some of these, call bots and things like that. Generally, the reaction is, well, I'm not going to use it because my clients want to talk to me, right? And I don't argue that they want to talk to you, right? But for which purpose? Because if there's a job to be done and you can remove friction, like you said, Bekim, like I need to book an appointment. I want to come see you on, Tuesday at 9 a.m. Do I really need to talk to you? No, I don't. Right. And it's the same
Right.
thing. We've replaced parking attendants and we've replaced, travel agents and all that sort of stuff. And we're absolutely fine with, dealing with the technology and trust it with, booking our trips and doing all sorts of tasks because, again, it just removes that inefficiency that exists today, right? And I'm not belittling the human value, but I'm just saying, how do we leverage that to remove some of the friction? How do we leverage the technology to come in and just do a better job for these menial types of tasks, which leads us probably to kind of the next step, which is I get asked a lot, well, okay, well, if we got all this AI, am I going to have a future as a mortgage broker or as a real estate agent or as a lender? And I kind of have the same answer for everyone. Like, yes, you will, because ultimately high stakes, high stress transaction is always going to need people. I know AI is going to get far more empathic than it is today to give you those like, cheesy responses. Oh, sorry, you feel that way, right? It's going to get much better on that
That's a
sense.
good AI impression. Yeah, yeah.
Right? Yeah, I'm trying to get there. But ultimately, the ones that do deploy technology to become more efficient and get rid of these like menial tasks, the appointment booking, the pushing the documents, the 10,000 emails flying back and forth in a transaction, you're going to have that competitive advantage, right? Because everybody wants instant gratification, everybody wants that seamless experience, and nobody wants to, continue to invest in that legacy world, right? So someone
Hmm.
with AI as their toolkit, and that's all it is, it's a toolkit for now, will have a much greater competitive advantage over someone who is just still believes that, hey, my clients want to talk to me and it's got to be me answering all the phones and it's got to be me
Right.
sending all the emails and all that stuff. It's great thinking, but it'll never scale.
Right. Yeah. Like your client wants their handheld for the hard stuff. I think about even a mortgage going through the process, and you'll talk to a mortgage broker like, "Hey, I do a great job communicating with my clients through the process." And like, what does that look like? And like, once a week, I give them a call and I tell them what all of their outstanding conditions are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if instead it was automated that the client received a weekly text message and a weekly email stating what all of their outstanding conditions are? And you could still call the client every single week, but instead of hounding them for the documents that you just got an automated text to tell them about, you were instead filling in all the gaps for all the other things that they needed to understand as part of the process and actually supporting them through the transaction and really holding their hand in the way that matters as opposed to all the mundane tasks. So I couldn't agree more. It's not about replacing the human, it's about enhancing the human, allowing that experience to be a lot more personal and not focus so much on the pushing of paper, but rather on the relationship. And I've said it from the beginning, and I'll always believe this: the relationship and the communication between humans is the last piece to go. It's all of the administrative that we need to ultimately work on and solve for. And I think that's the best place. And AI may get hard coded for empathy, but it will never have actual human empathy, and it will never actually, become part of the overall relationship that exists between two people. So with that, I do want to just maybe pivot a little bit here to ask you two more questions, if you will. One is a takeaway, and the second is more specific to you. But if I've learned a little bit about DDID, I've learned a little bit about your thoughts on technology and how you think about consumer experience. If I'm a mortgage agent, I'm listening to this show today, what do you think is a great takeaway that folks can have, that they can actually just say, hey, I just listened to this podcast and I just got some great advice. Here's what I'm going to go do about my business to make it better. What's that one thing that you think that someone could take away and learn from you?
I think we just touched on it, Bekim, which is it really boils down to the experience. This is not a technology discussion. Technology is a mere enabler or most of the times accelerator of what you already do well. So when I talk to a mortgage broker, I say, what do you already do well that you'd like to do better or scale up? And ultimately, coming back at it from a consumer's angle, what I look for in professionals that I like to work and deal with is, will they curate a great and seamless experience for me? I think everybody has the same access to product and rate and knowledge and information, at the end of the day, can you make it easier for me? Can you make it easier for me to qualify, to switch, to refinance and all that stuff? So, what does your journey look like? And from our perspective at DDIT is who you partner with actually matters. I know a lot of people don't wake up in the morning saying, oh, my closing process is broken. I got to fix it. But I think in conversations that we have day in and day out, we realize how inefficient and most importantly, how a consumer, a borrower walks away at the end of it and just has this like lasting impression up here that it wasn't great. And when people say, to you, I'm never doing this again, or this was painful, or I'm never moving again, it's not good for our industry, right? So we owe it to ourselves to think about what that journey looks like, sometimes take on the brunt of abstracting that complexity so our client doesn't necessarily see it. But it's really
Yeah.
thinking about, the journey, not only from a process perspective, but from an empathy perspective. How does my client feel at every stage of the way, from the minute that they first meet me all the way through to like, hey, congratulations. How about, we get a nice little Google review going, right?
Yeah. It's so important, especially the ending, because as a mortgage broker, you can do everything perfectly. If something goes wrong at the closing table, even though you had zero control over it, it could have even been sometimes the client, it's their own lawyer. And they'll come back and they'll be like, this whole mortgage was terrible. And you have to like actually call them and say, hey, you left a negative review. Like, what was terrible? I've got, transcriptions from all the calls. I've got notes and I've had 100 conversations with you. Everything went perfect. Where did we go wrong? Oh, right at the closing table, this thing happened. It's like, I'm not your lawyer. I did my job. And everyone's like feeling like pretty good about the work they did. But if it ultimately does not get delivered the way that you want it to, consumer experience wise, at the closing table, then ultimately the client will reflect that throughout their memory over the entire journey. And they'll say this entire mortgage was terrible. So it's such an important point. If you're going to do a great job, you're going to work hard to deliver a client experience on the front. It's so important that you're working with the right partners to get the right experience on the closing of the mortgage as well, because that is a reflection of you and the work that you're doing. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've worked together on this for years now, and there's been so many good experiences. And when there are rough experiences, the first thing that we do is we pick up the phone, we call one another, our teams work together to make sure that we get things solved. So I appreciate that. And it's definitely a part of your legacy. So on that legacy piece, Reuven, or impact, you've founded and led a couple of companies now. You've worked in corporate environments, you've built teams, you have partnerships across our industry in real estate and mortgage in Canada. What do you want your impact and legacy to be like for the remainder of your career and in life, if you want to be so grand about it?
It's seeing the impact, right? I love the journey. I love the building. I love the grind. I love, I learned to love it, especially this time around. But ultimately, what makes me get excited is knowing that we're driving that impact. That one happy homeowner that just, left a great review saying, wow, this has been like the best experience and I'm so happy. And, dare we say, maybe as a starting point, didn't cry this time around. That's what gives me and our entire team, that's what gives us the satisfaction. We know that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So for me, coming back from like building a product that like literally started as an idea on a half a napkin during COVID, is now actually, helping fulfill a lot of dreams and helping others, helping our partners deliver a better experience and grow and thrive. That's my North Star. And that's what I'm hoping to continue to build and realize on a larger scale.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, you're certainly doing that. And it's been great talking to you, Reuven. Thank you for joining me today. And for anyone who's interested, go check out ddid.ca for all your closing needs. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's been great.